We'll call this meeting to order. First order of business is disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. Seeing done the minutes from December 10th. Was there any errors or omissions? Mover and seconder for those minutes in. Mover, Widner, all in favor? Carried. No delegations. Move right into 2022 budget. Adam, we'll pass it over to you.
Thank you very much. I will do a presentation before we get into council discussion for the 2022 draft capital budget. So just as a reminder, today the focus is on the capital budget. The operating budget will be tackled on the March 29th meeting, and then after that we'll be deliberating any outstanding items or any amendments that council will be proposing as a result of today and the meeting on March 29th. So what can be expected from today's meeting? I will do a presentation. The key takeaways are going to be what is a capital budget? How does the budget connect with the township's other financial operations? How much funding does the township have and where does it come from? How much is proposed to be spent and how can we ensure we don't spend too much? How is the township's current financial position impacted? After that, I do want to note we've got some unfinished business with the EECC, so I'm going to be bringing forward recommendations in regards to that, and then we'll get into an open council discussion. I just want to remind everyone today the focus is on the capital budget, so some items like tax rates aren't going to be talked about in today's presentation. I would just ask that you hold off until I've had my opportunity to present the operating budget on March 29th. And after that, we'll do the 10-minute question period from the public. Okay, so what's a capital budget? Cost relating to the purchase, construction, or rehabilitation of tangible capital assets or other significant strategic investments. Investments into assets used to provide services. That's in contrast to the operating budget that focuses on day-to-day expenditures and costs to provide services. Some examples of a capital budget: a reconstruction of a road, purchase of a vehicle, a strategic master plan. So how does the capital budget connect with the township's financial operations? Normally, we spend a lot of time in capital budget deliberations focusing on the blue circle, the capital budget itself. What projects are we going to be doing this year? And just discussing the merits of those. I want to talk a little bit today about how the capital budget is funded and how it connects with the other strategic decision-making that's taking part of the budget deliberations as a whole. So our capital funding sources are property taxes, grants, user fees, and development charges. They're collected into the operating budget and then transferred to reserves. And then reserves are transferred to the capital budget to fund projects. So the point of this diagram is to illustrate the fact that what is transferred from the operating budget is set, and it may differ from what the capital budget is required to be funded. So we could have a capital budget that is in excess of what's being contributed to a reserves in a given year, and that's okay. That's how our capital financing strategy is designed. We transfer money to reserves, we save up for projects that are larger than what would normally be able to be fit into a single year's worth of funding, and then we fund those projects through the reserves. And I've just got a little definition here of financial sustainability simplified. Long-term financial sustainability can be achieved when A equals B, while providing desired levels of service. So when our capital funding equals our capital spending over the long term, we're financially sustainable without compromising our capital plan, without compromising infrastructure. So how much funding does the township have and where does it come from? We have approximately $900,000 in restricted funding and almost $1.6 million in unrestricted funding annually each year. So that amounts to about close to $2.5 million. On top of that, we have development charges. Collection of development charges is irregular, so I don't count it as our annual baseline funding. It can go up and down, and the spending of it can go up and down depending on the current strategic initiatives of the township. Okay, so this is what the relationship between our operating budget and our reserves looks like in the budget. This is our contributions to fund reserves, which will in turn fund capital. If you look at the restricted section, we have Canada Community Building Fund, which is formerly federal gas tax funding of almost $300,000. We have OSA funding from the province, Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund, of nearly $463,000. A note on that one is that the funding formula did change this year going into 2022. So our annual allotment has increased almost $200,000. So that's very good news for the township of Malahide, and that's expected to persist into future years. And then we have our development charges, which are also a restricted revenue source. So $800,000, almost $900,000 comes into the operating budget, and an equal amount goes out to reserves. No impact on the taxpayer. This is the strategic section of the operating and capital budget. We talk about what does the township need in capital funding in future years, and this is the section of the budget that focuses on it. It's page 47 of the draft budget. So currently, the township contributes, or is recommending to contribute, almost $1.6 million in property taxes to fund capital projects annually. So that means regardless of which projects are cut from the capital budget this year or added, we are fixed at $1.6 million impact to the property taxpayer in 2022, unless this section were to be revised. Okay, that's important to note because sometimes there's expectation a project gets cut, property tax rate goes down. That's not the case here. Where you would have to cut the annual funding amount that's being contributed to reserves to impact the tax rate. So how much is proposed to be spent? The draft budget came in at $3.252 million. Since then, we've made some adjustments in light of information we've received since the draft budget was published. I had noted in the report that the EECC skate tile project got deferred. That was not the case, so that is still very much on the table. That's why I've scratched that out in my presentation. But what has changed is that we've taken the Vienna Line culvert construction project, which was originally budgeted at $1 million, and we've decided to defer it to 2023. The decision to do that was because we got cost estimates that made us aware that it was going to come in at a much greater cost than $1 million, and we had already proposed a quite aggressive budget as it was. So we felt that kind of pushed us over the edge of what would be financially viable for 2022. So the plan will be save up reserves a bit for next year, knowing that we have this Vienna Line project, just do the design in 2022 for $50,000, and then we'll be more financially prepared for that huge project for the township. So instead of the $3.2 million, we're at $2.3 million instead. This is how the capital project list breaks down. Most of the money is being spent on the road network, which is not a surprise. And second is our fleet and equipment. Not coincidentally, these are the areas that are being addressed in the operating budget. We are recommending increases to the annual funding that those categories receive. This is your historical trends of capital projects over the last few years, just in case you're wondering if we brought something forward this year that was drastically different from what you've received in prior years. That's not so. 2019 was a bit of an anomaly because we did the pier that year, so that we actually did have a debenture that paid for the cost of that project. Average capital spending from 2019 to 2021 was about $3 million, and we're proposing about 2.3 this year. So that begs the question, how much money do we actually bring in, and how does that compare to how much we're proposing to be spent? And the question posed on the slide is, how can we ensure we don't spend too much? So by comparing how much money we have coming in to how much money we have going out, that's how you can be assured that we're not overspending in our capital budget. So with capital funding at $2.3 million and our capital costs around $2.3 million as well, this year we're expecting to more or less break even on our reserves pertaining to capital with a net capital contribution of $51,736. And then I have some recommendations here to enhance our ability to ensure we don't spend too much because we know it's more than a single year exercise. So you have to be looking out into the future to ensure that financial sustainability is being respected in the long term. So a multi-year capital forecast, which would be informed through master plans, asset management, et cetera, and a capital financing strategy, primarily through a reserve management policy, which I've alluded to is being prepared in the 2022 budget, and debt mitigation strategies, as well as a cash flow and investment strategy. So how's the township's current financial position impacted? The full reserve forecast is provided in the 2022 draft budget. What I've done here is just a condensed version of that. So our 2021 reserves did climb to a peak due to unspent operating and capital funds. We expect that to be more or less maintained if the 2022 budget is passed as proposed. And then moving ahead to 2023, I suspect we would have a heavier capital budget, and there's some contingency items that are going to be spent out of reserves that we'll talk about on March 29th meeting. I expect our reserves will return to levels closer to that of 2020. Okay, so before we get into EECC, I just wanted to open it up for any questions about the financing aspect of the capital budget in particular, and if there are no questions, we can proceed on to EECC.
Okay, thanks, Adam. Questions for Adam on what's been presented so far? The cancellation of the pad in the complex, when did that come about? I wasn't aware of that.
That was an error on my part. I thought that project had been deferred through the board meeting deliberations. I think that was on the table to be that project to be deferred, but it actually wasn't. So I just wanted to make that clarification.
So it's off for 22 and on for 23, is that what they're saying?
The ski tile project is currently on for 2022. That being said, we haven't passed the EECC budget, so it's open for discussion.
Okay. Questions for Adam on what's been presented so far? Go ahead, Scott.
Through you, and maybe more to Matt, on this culvert, putting it off and spending $50,000 on a study. Is that study still going to be valid a year later, or is it going to have to be redone again? Just
through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, this would be for the design component of that project. So we end up with an approved design that we can shelve and look for additional funding for. So that design would always be available, and then we can use it into 2023. The issue with that culvert being it was identified as a priority culvert in our last inspections. We don't like surprises when it comes to large culverts and bridges, so we aggressively were pushing towards having it undertaking the work in 2022. Seeing the way the construction industry has changed and pricing is through the roof with recent estimates, we can defer the construction of it based on its current condition and the additional inspections being undertaken this year and get an adequate design to replace it that would be available in the following year.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Any other questions for any of the staff? Mark?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to Adam. Adam, we talked about in the complex that where they parked the ice resurfacer, $15,000 expenditure. It seems really high, and I think it could be fixed a whole lot cheaper than that. Where is that at now? Is it still in their budget, or still in the arena budget?
Thank you for your question. I do have a section prepared for the EECC, so if there are no other questions that pertain to the presentation I just gave, I'd like to give my EECC spiel, and that might answer some of the questions that are going to come forward from council.
Okay, thanks, Adam. Any other questions on what's presented, and then we'll go to the next step. All right, carry on, Adam.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so unfinished business. Going forward, here's what's currently on the table. The operating budget was uncontested. It was what I believe was the result of prior board meetings, so we have no issue with the operating budget as it was proposed. Capital budget is provided on the slide as it's currently on the table. As we noted in prior meetings, Malahide Council was not supportive of the capital budget in its current state. So a task at tonight's meeting will be to determine what position Malahide wants to take, whether projects should be cut or what form the 2022 capital budget for the complex should take. I have my own recommendations, which I'll provide to council, and then we'll open it up for further questions. So I just wanted to say we should be focusing on 2022's budget just for the purpose of this meeting. Future years are not required to be approved and can be debated in future meetings. So we're talking about the parking lot project here. I know the price tag was a bit shocking to council, and I hear that, I understand that, but that's not on the table tonight. You're not being asked to approve that project in particular. You're only being asked to approve what's under this capital table here in front of you right now. What I'd recommend is that you allow time for the management teams to work together behind the scenes on a future capital plan, 2023 and beyond, that may satisfy all parties. The 2022 budget as proposed is currently being funded on the Malahide side without a significant impact to financial operations. So you can pass it in its current state and it will not have a significant financial impact. I've got it fully funded. I've got the dollars and cents accounted for. So my ultimate recommendation is going to be that council approve the 2022 EEC budget as proposed under the condition that the ice resurfacer undergoes a third-party condition assessment, which is to be reported to the board, and that replacement of the ice resurfacer will be entirely contingent upon both receipt of the third-party condition assessment and the satisfaction of the majority of the board that replacement should occur, and that staff be directed to consult with Elmer on developing the long-term capital budget for the East Elgin community complex in a manner that can be financially supported by the Township of Malahide. So that's my recommendation. I understand we have concerns and questions about other projects, so I'll turn it back over to council to express those.
Okay, Mark, you had a question.
I spoke to you about, I guess it's on there where they park the ice resurfacer. You set it down to $7,500, did they say? I thought it said 15 before, but I said 75. Yeah, 7,500, right?
That's correct, 7,500.
I have a question about this ice resurfacer. They send it out every year. You shouldn't need to do a review on it because the review should have been done when they do the inspection on it. I mean, if there's any major thing wrong with it, they should have noted that, and it should be there. I mean, it's no different when farmers send out their combines, their big tractors. They send them in, and they have them go over it. And you tell me what's wrong with it. And they'll note everything that's wrong with it. You can either fix it yourself, or they'll fix it. When you get it back, you know what this thing's doing. So I think that's already been done with that thing. It's my opinion, but.
Go ahead.
If I may, I think perhaps what the problem here isn't any individual project, it's just the process of developing the capital plan in general. Like if more information could be provided perhaps in the future, like I think we just need to define a policy and how this information is being received by our council, and that might make this whole process more palatable. Because you seem to have questions about the technical aspects of the project, but no one on Malahide staff really can speak to some of those issues, right? So I think this is an opportunity to address how the board functions as a whole. And I think that's something we could work with the Elmer team on, because I know that they want this to run smoothly as well.
Okay, thanks, Adam. And I agree with your recommendation that we have a third party look at this. Hopefully it's not the party that's going to be selling us a ice resurfacer. That they may have a biased opinion, but because we don't know this, and I don't think even EE staff knows, is this thing, ice resurfacer, good for a year or 2 years or 3 years, or should we dump it now because it's going to cost us a fortune? So I do think that we need to have an outside assessment on it and give us a recommendation. Should we dump it now, or should we try to get it by for another couple of years? So that's, I know that's your recommendation, and I agree with it. So just any comments or questions on that one? Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I don't understand then why we ship it out every year.
Well,
I mean, if you did that to your own machine, wouldn't you believe what they told you? If it's a total piece of junk, I'm sure they're going to write it down. It should be replaced. I mean, you got two mechanics on this council. We kind of maybe get a little more passionate about this stuff, but I'm sure you can agree with that, Mr. Lewis. You wouldn't send them out unless there was a good. You do an inspection, you're going to tell somebody if it's junk because it's your butt on the line.
and I think that's what's happened, is that they send it out to the place who's selling you the project, and they said you're past your lifespan, but they may have a little bit of a biased opinion.
Did they say it's past the lifespan, or is
Well,
that the government rating that says everything is past?
I think it said, was it after 8 years, Adam, that it's the lifespan and that's now at 10?
I can't confirm that, but what's being proposed here is a soft yes to the ice resurfacer in particular. So this is an approval contingent upon further information being provided. Those questions could be asked when that report's brought forward to the board.
I see a lot of heads nodding, so that is a recommendation that's going to come further on in the meeting. But other questions on the EC?
One,
Rick? Yeah, go
yeah,
ahead, Rick.
I noticed the parking lot says now $27,500. I thought it was $650,000.
I'm
Like, what
guessing this is
changed?
I'm guessing this is for minor repairs in 2022.
So we're gonna do minor repairs in 2022, and then they're gonna wanna redo the whole thing again in 2023?
I don't know, Adam, you got a response?
Mr. Mayor, my guess is that this is the half of the engineering costs. So the engineering costs were budgeted for this year at 55,000. So this is our portion. So that's one of my questions is if we're not sure, if we would like to strategize with Aylmer about different approaches to the parking lot, should that include also discussing the engineering costs? Or do you think the engineering is, no matter what we decide, is going to be 55,000? I'm wondering if that one can be revisited, because I agree we're not discussing the full cost of the parking lot for next year, but it looks like the engineering would be done this year, and it still seems steep at 55.
Well,
Is that your take on it, that the 27 is for the engineering?
I don't want to state an official position, I'm not sure.
It is coincidental.
It seems
that
reasonable.
The engineering was 55, yeah.
Sorry, the capital budget that we saw at the board meeting does show 55,000 for
Yeah.
2022, this year. So that's why I think it is our portion of that.
Max?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Was there not something in that complex meeting that this would be considered, providing there was a grant they could receive? Apparently, they have applied last year or recently for some kind of a government grant from the upper governments, and they were not fortunate enough to get it, and they were hoping that would come back again so they could apply again and possibly get sufficient funds to do the complete paving or whatever. And in the meantime, do the patching to the worst spots for as little as possible. And that's what I got out of that meeting with the complex.
Yeah, I recall that as well, Max. And I think Chester brought it up about the engineering. I know the Peters Paving does a large parking lot. There's no engineering in that. They just pave the parking lot. So the question is, is it necessary to have an engineering on this? So I'm suggesting that maybe another point that be deferred for another year. Mark?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I kind of struggle with the engineering costs too, but maybe Matt, you could help us. Like, would that be soil sampling? That kind of thing?
From my take on it, and I haven't been involved in the process of looking at that, this project specifically, but from the percentage that this portion is of the paving, it'd be my assumption that this would have to do with sub-base design, pavement design, grading design, and contract administration for when the work is undertaken. So again, I don't know specifically, I wasn't involved in the conversation, but that's my take on it, that it wouldn't be a $50,000 design that's being prepared, but that would be the entire engineering, which includes inspection and contract administration, quality assurance inspections, those types of things. That would be my take on it.
Okay, but that would come in 2023, not 2022, right?
That's correct. So again, I wasn't specifically involved in it, but it looks like I would take this as, it's looked at as a percentage of the construction cost, and it was just lumped under the engineering line item. That might come across multiple years, but that's also, again, an assumption.
Max?
Thank you. Once again, Mr. Mayor, was I won't say was there, I know there was back a couple of years ago or whatever, major concerns with that front big parking lot in regards to drainage problems in there. And there was some tidbit repairs made, some catch basins or something fixed, and what have you. Has that problem been fully addressed before you start thinking of putting a new top on it, so you get the same problem over again? That's a question to ask, I guess, Elmer, or whoever the roads department or whoever looks after that part of it. But I know there was major concerns there in regards to the drainage out there under that big front parking lot.
Okay. Matt, or Adam?
Yes, through you, your worship. So it's clear the capital budget has a line item in 2022 for $55,000, assumably would be split between the two municipalities. I think it's my recommendation to council this evening that given that we're seeking information on the specifics of that 55,000, so in 2023 in their draft capital budget, there's a $595,000 item for the parking lot replacement. This $55,000 item might be engineering or an assessment or something an assessment of some point, but we can certainly get clarification for that piece and follow up with council.
Okay. Any other questions for Adam on the EEC? Chester?
Mayor Manel, I still have a problem with that 55,000 for engineering. I've seen parking lots as big as that paved, and there wasn't that kind of money spent for engineering. A firm came in and gave you a price of what it would cost to pave the parking lot, and that included engineering or whatever they had to do. But our own engineers had to oversee it to make sure that the layer of asphalt was to the right thickness so that we wouldn't have this kind of problem. When we do roads, do we have a special engineer that goes along with the people laying the asphalt down to make sure it's down properly? Or is it our own engineering department that looks after that? If I remember correctly, our own engineering department looks after that. So I don't see why we'd have to spend another $55,000 for an engineer to go along and say that, yes, this is fine, or it isn't fine. If there's a problem there, like Max said with the drain, that should be looked at and make sure that there isn't a problem. But as far as everything else is concerned, I think it's just a waste of money to spend that kind of money on engineering. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jess. And certainly that's direction to staff, and certainly Adam is going to be talking to the finance department at the EEC as well as the town of Aylmer to see, okay, is it necessary to have this in 2022? What is it? And can this be altered? So, Adam?
Yeah, so I think the important thing tonight, we've noted an issue with the parking lot. I don't disagree with the approach that council's taking on it. Perhaps we should seek more information, but I think we do need to define what we like, what we're approving, and what we're outright rejecting, and what we're seeking more information on. So if we could define that tonight, I think that's going to go a long way and help Elmer proceed with their budgeting practices.
Okay, any other questions for Adam on the EEC? There is a recommendation. Adam?
Could we have that slide back up with the proposed resolution? Through you, Mr. Mayor, maybe start, yeah, the slide with each item. If I understand correctly, you would like us to just relook quickly at those items for EECC and make sure that we're okay on all of them except for perhaps one or two. Could we see that slide again? Yeah.
My apologies. That is not out. That's currently very much on the table. That was a mistake I had made in my report. I'm also going to note an error, actually, in putting together this slide. I apologize. I would focus on the Malahide share. That does have accurate information. I'm just noticing the cost totals. Some of that is inaccurate, so I'm just going to remove that. But the Malahide share is accurate to what the ECC's budget was.
I was going to say, can you go full screen on that?
So did we want to go through item by item and do a yes or no for each? Would that be beneficial to the committee? Okay, so as I said, we're recommending a conditional yes on the ice resurfacer, that a condition assessment come forward to the board. And if the board is satisfied with the results of the condition assessment, that they would approve the purchase of a new ice resurfacer at that time.
So consensus on that? Okay, so we're good with that one. Let's move on to the skate tile. And that one was questionable whether it was necessary for 2022 or not. And I would suggest that's probably one that we can postpone for another year. Scott?
Through you, your mayor, I do have to say that after we had our meeting, that is one thing that people brought to my attention that they thought was just absolutely ludicrous, that we would pay $150,000 so people could walk with skates to get to the ice pad. So I'm just being the voice that I was asked to be, but they went, wow, like they couldn't believe it.
So I'm getting consensus, so no on the skate tile.
Yeah.
Parking lot, once again, if this is destined for 2023, potentially, I don't think it should be in our 2022 budget. Adam?
So through you, I did find a little bit of details in the board reports that went to the EEC board, and it stated there that that $55,000 was with regards to pre-engineering of the parking lot repairs, and that was to support the board's ongoing Trillium grant application of $500,000. That's outlined in their 2023 capital budget. So I think it's certainly tied to the parking lot restoration, but it was brought to the board's attention in November.
So do you read that if we need the engineer's report to potentially apply for a grant?
Typically, and kind of what Matt spoke to earlier with the Vienna line, having a study done so that when a municipality or a board can apply for grant funding, having that work planned for, and yes, it's shovel ready, is what's needed there.
Okay, well, in that case, I've changed my opinion. If that's contingent on applying for a grant, then 27,000 is probably money well spent to get the grant. So, it's a hard pill to swallow, but I'm in favor of the, what's it called? The 27,000 for the pre-engineering.
Well, I have a question.
Go ahead, Rick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Like, to spend this money on a study or an engineer's report, is that to replace the entire parking lot? Or are we just, because it seems like a lot of money to lay out, because we don't even know if we're gonna do the whole parking lot brand new or what we're gonna do yet. So I don't understand the need for an engineer's report when we don't even know really down the road what we're going to do.
Well, I think the recommendation was to replace the whole parking lot.
Well, I drove through there and I know there's some rough spots, there's no doubt about it. But there's a lot of good stuff there too. And I don't see having to redo the whole parking lot for about 3 bad spots. And I still, that's a lot of money. And I can't see it myself. I can't support it.
But right
Redoing
now,
the
we're just
whole-
talking, Rick, right now, we're just talking about getting an engineer's report. That would be contingent on getting a grant. If you don't have an engineer's report, you don't qualify for the grant.
But we don't even know what we're gonna do with the parking lot. That's what I'm saying. So how come we're gonna spend money on a study that we don't know exactly what we're gonna do yet?
Dominique?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, maybe to Matt, would the engineering report help us plan or assess what needs to be done and make recommendations on different materials, different alternatives, different, let's say, a 5-year replacement plan? Could we get that out of that engineering report?
My take on the topic would be that this would be for a detailed engineering design of the preferred alternative to take care of all the issues that parking lot holds, being the drainage, the poor subbase, lack of asphalt in areas, the cold joints in the asphalt. Some areas might need to be redone, some could stay, but that would be the exact purpose of the detailed engineering design, and then having a shovel-ready project ready for grant opportunity, or absent of grant, what work can be done or possibly phased.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on the engineering? Rick or Mark?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think you're right. I mean, grants are usually contingent on having some kind of re-engineering done. We've been there 100 times, so we know that. One reason I would probably support it, that parking lot isn't all that old in comparison. But I know in the beginning, when we were doing this, I brought it up at our meetings. I don't think they should be paving it the first year. Well, they had to get the grant. And it was a poor sub base. And I know that swell there, and you really got to pack it to make it good. And it was crappy. It kind of broke up right away. So I think we have to see what we even got under there. This thing could cost us a whole lot more money than what's projected too. So if we don't know, we don't know. So that's just my opinion. But I was there in the beginning, so I remember it.
Okay, we've got consensus on the engineering firm. So hot water heaters, I have no idea. It's not a big ticket item, but I guess I've got to trust staff that they tell somebody that needs replacement, that needs replacement. And I'm getting just, I don't know. Chester or me?
The hot water heaters, are they leaking?
I have no idea. There was a recommendation by staff they be replaced, so that's all I know. Matt or any staff have any ideas on that one? No. Adam?
I'm just reading the November capital report from the town staff, and there's no details as to what those 4 hot water heater units are required for. Probably due to be replaced.
Mayor Manel, this seems to be another one of those cases where it's 10 years old, so therefore it should be replaced. I have a water heater that's been going for 35 to 40 years, and it's fine. I also have replaced one this year that was 5 years old. So unless it's leaking, unless there's something wrong, unless the heater coils aren't working, then why bother replacing it just for the sake of replacing it?
Well, I've got to put my trust in the staff of the EEC. If they tells me it's shot, then I'm not qualified to look at it, and so I've got to trust their opinion.
They should have laid some of this out for us so that we'd know what the problem was, whether it's a leaking problem or whether it's a heating problem, because water heaters can be quite dangerous. So we're working in the dark. They're not telling us anything. That's my objection to it. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on the water heater? This is one of the smaller ticket items, so I'd be in favor of replacing the water heaters, and hopefully that they're telling us that they're shot. Consensus? Adam or Max, did you have a?
I was just going to add, given the age of the facility, it's entirely conceivable that these would be due to be replaced for the amount of money that's being requested here. I do think it's a routine kind of capital item that we would expect to see through the capital budget, so I don't know that this level of scrutiny is required for such an item, but this does, I brought up the point that maybe this is an opportunity to fix the process going forward. If we want information for these types of items, we could let town staff know that, and that'll change our budget process going forward. But I do think it's important we get past the 2022 budget. It's not a big ticket item. I think we have to put some faith into the staff that are running the facility.
Yeah. And I'm getting consensus around the table that we do so. So we're good with the water heater. What's the concrete floor? And I have no idea the condition of that, but once again, the staff says it needs replacing. I'm afraid that I've got to go along with staff, and we could get down in the weeds where we never get out. Any comments, Mark?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think they alluded to the fact the concrete was getting all scratched up or, deteriorating a little bit, but I think I said at the time, why can't they just put down a rubber mats or something that's going to be a lot more durable? Just putting a new cement floor down is not going to fix the problem. It's just going to be destroyed in, in a matter of years anyway. So I think it's a cheaper route and probably a safer route, but thank you.
The opportunity does exist to approve any of these items with contingencies like we did for the ice resurfacer. So if you want consideration of alternatives, perhaps that's a contingency we can add upon our approval.
I think that would be the case for all of these, that, if there's a second question on any of these that is not necessary, then certainly we wouldn't go through with it. So I would agree with your recommendation that we have a contingency on every one of these subjects except for we already got a recommendation on the ice resurfacer, but the balance, if there's a second opinion, and if they can justify one of these items, then do so. But as everyone has said, there wasn't a lot of discussion at the EEC what the condition was. Mark?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think probably one of the best things that we could be done is to have a little bit of a tour through this complex to look at some of these things. We're just being told things. I don't like being told. I like to see them, but we know we did it before previously in other terms, so I would suggest we do that.
And the same thing with the security camera. I have no idea. Once again, is that the lifespan or is that necessary?
Technology does seem to not last as long as other types of assets. So again, it's conceivable, but I don't have any firsthand information in regards to that project, but it seems reasonable to me.
So what's your recommendation on the balance here, Adam? So we can go forward.
So did we receive consensus on each item?
Once again, with the security cameras, does it need replacing, or is it, until we have someone that's qualified to say that, it's a piece of junk, we don't know.
I believe the town's stated position is that they're due to be replaced, right? Or else they wouldn't be requesting it through the budget. So again, we're kind of in a position where our processes aren't that we are doing these facility tours to see firsthand the shape of some of the assets that are being requested to be replaced. And that's a process that perhaps we can talk to the town of Almer about, see if they're receptive to such a process change. But I think for now, they're not big ticket items. I think they're reasonable items. And I think the security cameras, I think that could be approved without much further inquiry.
Okay, I'll support Adam in the security camera. Once again, it's not a big ticket item, and we have no idea that if it's finished its lifespan or not. Dominique?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I think I'd like to suggest that, I mean, I can see it could be frustrating for staff as well, because there was an opportunity to discuss this at the board. I do recall, it's too bad that the report itself in writing has no details. It just says, it's time to replace this, it's time to replace that. And all we have to go by is the discussion, which was over Zoom or whichever tool they use. It was not ideal. And so now we're left with, oh, I can't remember what they said, or what was the rationale for this or for that. But at some point, I agree that perhaps the recommendation moving forward is we ask for a better process, a better documentation, better reports, and more discussion leading up to the budget being presented. So I think for this evening, for the sake of moving forward, I would say we've already agreed so the ice resurfacer is contingent on the third party. Skate tile, we would like to defer. Parking lot, we would like to defer. We're going ahead because it's for pre-engineering. And so everything else, basically, I think for the value that it is, and I think we have to take some responsibility for not asking the questions at the time when everything was being discussed, and then kind of coming here and second guessing. So we have to take that responsibility.
So Adam, your recommendation on the budget just addresses the ice resurfacer. So how do we pass a motion to reflect what was discussed tonight?
Adam, I can handle, if council deems it appropriate to add a resolution to what Adam has drafted on the screen in front of us this evening that speaks to the skate tile project being deferred, the council can do that if it deems appropriate. And Allison can assist in drafting a statement to that effect.
Through your worship, so to confirm that you are approving the parking lot engineering costs, and that council directs staff to seek clarification from Elmer and EECC staff in regards to all other outstanding proposed capital budget items? No.
No, so going back, if we can look at the item again. So Adam has a statement about getting a third-party condition assessment for the ice resurfacer. That's going to go unchanged. We'll probably add a whereas statement or an and that statement that speaks to deferring the skate tile project. And then as far as I understand council's discussion, the rest of the statements would remain unchanged. It's just one more and
All
that
right,
statement.
Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead, Rick.
Mr. Mayor, I don't know if we had clarity on the security cameras or not, because all the staff was recommending is it's time they got replaced. But if you walk in there and you see everything's working, I don't know why we need a new one when the old one's working fine. And you keep saying all the time that, well, it's not a big ticket item, but 10,000 here, 7,500 there, 10,000 or 16,000 there, all those not big ticket items add up to big ticket item cost. So I think we gotta, I like Councilor Whitner's idea of going in there and seeing it for ourselves. And then we know. And I think that's, before anything, that's what we should be doing.
Scott, you have a question?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. Mr. Johnson that night about the cameras did say that there was cameras that were inoperable. He said the law, I'm pretty sure it was lobby camera that didn't work at all. Like he did mention cameras that were not functioning. I do remember that 100%. I gotta say that. So this, yeah, I would say go ahead with what we've got. And
I'm assuming the security cameras were the same ones that were installed 20 years ago, and there is a lifespan. So what's our resolution to do? What, the recommendation on the ice resurfacer, defer the skate tile, and pass the balance? Okay, now I can fill that in. Defer ice or skate tile. And pass, what do we call it, other recommendations?
Adam, can you switch to your and that statement, your resolutions?
The rest of the capital. What's over?
I would recommend reading all four. I mean, these three plus the skate tile deferral. And then that encompasses everything we discussed.
I'm looking for direction from staff. How do you want to deal with it? One motion? So the motion is going to be that we get a third party for the ice resurfacer, defer the skate tile, and pass the rest of the capital recommendations. So everyone understand?
There are two more statements.
And the staff, going forward, I would really like to have this on my iPad or hard copy, because my old eyes can hardly even see over there. Okay, all right. Okay, so everybody understand where we are? And I'll read it out. That council will approve the 2022 EEC budget as proposed under the condition that the ice resurfacer undergoes a third-party condition assessment, which is to be reported to the board. The replacement of the ice resurfacer will be entirely contingent upon both a receipt of the third-party condition assessment and the satisfaction of the majority of the board that replacement should occur. Staff be directed to consult with the Elmer on developing a long-term capital budget for the EEC in a manner that can be financially supported by the Township of Malahide, and that we defer the state skate tile and pass the rest of the capital recommendation. Everybody understand? Dominic, or did you have a question? Do you have a question before we go ahead, Jess?
Yes, Mayor Manel. And I'm wondering just why we're not using the surcharge that they're collecting over there for equipment. I understood that's what the purpose of it was. And I thought at one point that we had done away with the surcharge, but the surcharge has not been done away with. So why are we not using that money for that particular purpose?
Well, if I recall, there was 85,000. Was that what was in the kitty for the surcharge? And they were looking at putting that into the parking lot. Adam?
That's a good approximation, yep. They have around 85,000. I thought it was 83, but pretty close. So none of that, it's a valid point coming from Chester that those reserve monies could be used. Our benefit would be half of it, right? So 40,000 something if we decided that we wanted that. That's not how the EEC budget was proposed. No reserve funding was proposed to be used in the 2022 budget. I suspect that's something that could be used at a parking lot project or something significant that we really want that to be used against.
Okay, we do have a mover, Jagger, seconder, Lewis, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, anything else under the draft budget?
So that does conclude the presentation. I would open it up to council for questions that would extend beyond the ECC as long as they pertain to something capital related. As I mentioned before, we will be discussing operating budgets at the March 29th meeting. Just as a guideline, I've presented possible areas of discussion for today's meeting. Thank you.
Okay, questions for Adam on the capital budget, other than the complex? Okay, seeing, oh, did you have a question? Zoe?
Just maybe, thank you, Mr. Mayor, a comment and, yeah, probably more a comment. So first off, I want to say thank you for the budget and the way it's being presented and explained. I think this is one of the better, if not best, budget documents I've seen in a while. So it's refreshing to see that everything is there, it's detailed, it's explained, the numbers are there, and the narrative. So I think that's why there's little discussion. You compare when there's a report that's not detailed enough, we end up spinning our wheels and going around and not understanding why certain things are being proposed. And I think the lack of discussion this evening compared perhaps to other meetings is a testament to how well laid out the document was. So thank you. And the presentation. Thank you.
Any other questions on our capital budget? So do you want us to discuss the topics for the 29th meeting, Adam?
Yeah, so for the March 29th meeting, we're going to get into the traditional things that you saw at the front end of the budget document, like impact on taxpayers, what's changing with the levy, how budgets affect service levels, and what's the main reason that taxes are going up. We do have a proposed 1.88% increase to the tax rate, so we'll be discussing where that's coming from, and as well as an update on situations that have occurred from the published date to now, because a significant number of things have occurred, not at the very least the flood in Port Bruce. So there's some items that are worthy of mention, but that will be the subject of that meeting on March 29th.
Okay. Is there any other topics that we should be discussing on the 29th that anyone has burning issue with? Okay.
Just a question, Mr. Mayor. So for the next meeting, because of these new items, will you send us a new or a revised budget, or will you just speak to the budget that's already published and then share the changes or the new information at the time of the meeting?
My intent would be to just share the new information as part of the presentation, much like I did today. But I'm open to suggestions. If council would like to receive that another way, I think I would have time to prepare an amended version if that's preferable.
Well, my only request is if we can have your presentation either in hard copy or on our iPad. That's hard to read.
I do apologize. There are some late additions that were made to the presentation that resulted in not being able to provide it through the agenda. We will attach it for anyone that wants to read it after the fact.
Okay. So correspondence, nothing? So we do need a mover and second report number FIN 2205 titled 2022 Draft Capital Budget be received, and that municipal council approve those capital projects identified in 2022 in the total amount of, do we need to change that? With the after the discussion tonight?
I believe the correct amount should be $2,302,500. $2,500.
Is there anyone else online that wishes to ask questions on the capital budget? I don't think so, is there? Okay, our next budget meeting is on March 29th at 7 o'clock. So we need a mover and seconder for adjournment. Linsky and Widner, or did you have a question, Max? That was for the general public, and there's no one else on the, no, I don't. We're not aware of anybody else. Moved by Glinski, second by Widner, all in favor? Carried.